Good morning, good morning. Anybody here? Anybody here? Anyone? Saw somebody here. All right, well, I'm just going to go over it. Anybody can hop on at any point in time. I'm going to go over my components of sub 3:30 marathon, things to look for. And I'm going to talk about training paces, kind of building out your training and stuff. And if you've taken a look at my sub 3:30 video, we can go into a little bit more in-depth discussion if you'd like. But I don't see anybody yet, so I'm just going to go over the training paces and stuff like that. And then anybody hops on and has questions, you let me know. So, sub 3:30 marathon is an 8-minute mile. Okay, right on the dot. And 4 minutes for the 800, 2 minutes for the 400, 1 minute for the 200, and so on. So, based on equivalent training, and let's just use these are paces. Well, these are paces. What pace I'm going to give you are paces you build towards for sub 3:30. Okay, so easy pace running is going to be about 9:45 to 9 minutes per mile. All right, that's easy pace, so it's significantly slower. Steady pace running is 9 minutes, then 8:15 per mile. Okay, now you're building towards marathon pace again. Two different types of runs. Threshold training is anywhere between 7:30 and 7:25 per mile. Like cruise thousands, cruise with a minute recovery, cruise 1200s with 75-second recovery, cruise mile repeats with 90-second recovery, and so on. And then you break it down. Cruise 800-meter reps are 344 to 342. I'm looking at my running book here. And hey, Samir, 1,000-meter efforts are 440 to 438. Okay, these are with 1 minute recovery at threshold pace. Okay, so it's a little bit faster, than marathon pace training. 1,200-meter efforts, 536 to 533. And no problem, Samir. And 7:30 to 7:25 again per mile reps with 90-second recovery. So it's about 30 seconds or so faster than marathon training pace. All right. Tempo runs or anaerobic threshold runs will be between 7:40 and 7:35. That's more closer to half marathon pace. Okay. And VO2 Max running, which is generally 50 to 60 seconds faster per mile than marathon pace. 800-meter efforts are 330 to 328. Take about a 2-minute recovery. 1,000-meter efforts, 412 to 415. Take about a 3-minute recovery. 1,200-meter efforts, 515 to 520 per rep. Take about a 330 recovery. And mile reps, anywhere between 7 minutes and 7:10 per mile. About a 4-minute recovery. It's VO2 max running, so it's important to marathon training. Okay. Yesterday you ran 21:50 for 5K, and you broke 140 for the half. That's fantastic, man. So you're on pace. You're on track. The equivalent for a sub 3:30 is 140 and 140:45. So about an hour 40 and 45 seconds for a half mile equivalent to a sub 3:30. 10K equivalent's about 45:30. 5K equivalent's about 21:55. And a mile, if you can run a mile, it's about 6:25. And I suggest folks doing a 1 mile time trial before you start specifically training, because then it'll allow you to set up your training paces. And the paces that I gave you are paces you're going to be building towards for the half, okay? For the marathon, excuse me. So you might not be there yet, and that's okay. These are the paces you're building towards for the marathon. Okay, so we've done VO2 max. Now, speed development, okay? 400s, let's say you're doing a fartlek, okay, like a speed development and like a 10-mile run with 10 times a 400 and you're jogging a 200-meter effort in between each one. You run those at about 150 to 145 per rep. Let's say you do 300s after a run. Now the 150 to 145 per rep is about 10K to 5K pace. 300-meter efforts, 118 to 116, which is closer to 5K to 3K pace. And 200-meter efforts, let's say you do 4 to 5 times a 200 after a run or after a tempo, 52 to 51 seconds. That's closer to 3K and mile pace. So those are the speed development components to this. 330 is realistic if you're doing the right things leading up to it. Um, depending on how much time you're giving yourself to train for it, yes, it is realistic. So, and yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's 8 minutes per mile. So you have to get to the point where you're doing a 10-mile run at 8 minute per mile pace early in the season. And then if you can build out from that, kind of do a little bit more, because you want to get to the point where you can do like 15 to 16 miles at 8 minutes to 750 per mile at about 5 weeks out from the marathon. So you want to get to that point. That's a simulation run. It'll tell you how ready you are. Also, using that 10-mile run, you can do it at marathon pace. Then you can do it a couple weeks later, let's say 5 seconds faster than marathon pace, or 5 to 10 seconds faster per mile, which would be 755 to 750. And then a couple weeks later, you do that. You repeat that 10-mile run again, and let's say 745 to 740, which is 15 to 20 seconds faster per mile than marathon pace. So it's a sign of progression. You can either do more volume at marathon pace or that same 10-mile run a little bit faster. And you give them about 3 to 4 weeks in between each one where you do it. So fueling strategy, I mean, generally what works, it's whatever works, whatever's easily digestible, I should say. So whether it's water and sugar in it, or watered down Gatorade, or gels and stuff, you have to tinker with what your body can digest, because a marathon's a little bit of a different beast. So I generally recommend people fueling every 3 to 5 miles, like every 5K to 5 miles. So putting something in the body. But again, depends on what you're used to. If you're running the marathon in the warmer weather, then yeah, fueling a little bit more regularly is a good idea. So maybe closer to every 3 miles, and the cooler every 5 miles. But again, you have to figure out what works for you. You practice this in your long runs, okay? And it's generally how to kind of break it down. And also simulate, okay? So if your marathon's flat, doing a lot of your workouts and your long runs on the flat is a good idea. If your marathon's rolling, then doing a lot of long runs and workouts on the rolling is a good idea. You want to try to simulate as much as possible. Flat running, it's much easier to lock into pace, your goal, and just lock into 8 minutes or a little faster. Rolling, there's always a change in pace, so you want to get used to the fluctuation in pace and try to tighten that range over time to make it easier for you. So, hey, Eric. Good idea, Top. Stop for 2 minutes, eat something, and start again. Generally, when you're fueling, you don't stop. You're fueling while you're running. So if it's a gel, you take it a little bit by little, by little, by little. You want to practice that. You get to the point where you can kind of ingest some fuel while you're running. Okay, it might slow you down a little bit, but generally you don't stop to fuel. Okay, the last thing you want to do is throw the legs off rhythm, particularly in a marathon. VO2 max paces. So VO2 max running is about 50 to 60 seconds faster per mile than marathon pace. So if you're doing VO2 max 800s, it's 330 to 328. Okay. 1,000 meter efforts, 412 to 415. 1,200 meter efforts, 515 to 520. And mile efforts, 7 minutes to 710. Okay. You take 2 minutes in between the 800s, 3 minutes in between the 1,000s. Okay, or 3:30 in between the 1,200s, and about 4 minutes in between the mile reps. So that's your VO2 max paces for 3:30, for sub 3:30. And again, these are paces you're building towards. So if you're 16 weeks out and you can't do them right now, that's okay. But if you're also 16 weeks out, I suggest starting with the shorter ones, making sure you can handle them, and then building out. And you're building towards maybe no more than 5 to 6 miles in total volume in VO2 max, no more. If you can get up to 5, that's a good thing, okay? Anytime, my pleasure. So those are the types of things you build towards. And hey, Dimitri. So any questions on this? Any questions on this? You generally want to give yourself 12 to 16 weeks. And if you haven't taken a look at my sub 330 training video, take a look at it. You'll see it's broken down in blocks of 4 weeks where a new stimulus is introduced every 4 weeks, okay? Building out on workouts, long runs, and such, okay? What you want to do is hit the marathon when you're at its best, when you're at its peak, okay? And hit it while you're on your upswing and not on your downswing. So that's why you break it into 3 to 4 week blocks to give your body a chance to adapt to the training paces. It's called periodization. So, okay, what are your questions, Dimitri? What do we got? So to meet your endurance issues, that's when you want to build into your long runs, okay? And that's why you do threshold training to kind of help with the aerobic component of your training, okay? And build into the aerobic component of your training, and excuse me, and build into long runs and build a second run during the week. Call it an intermediate run. And that's a second. It's basically practicing being on your feet for an extended period of time. Okay, that's another component that you work on. Okay, so if you're doing a long run, building up towards 20 miles minimum, if you can. Okay, you can run 6 times sub 630 mile repeats. What kind of recovery? But you bonk during every long run. Well, those repeats are, well, for commensurate with a sub 330, it's a little fast. Bonk in the long run, especially after the 13-mile mark. What pace? So 6 times 630, that's a threshold mile repeat. Okay, so that's pretty fast if you're trying to run 330. And generally, you want to be around threshold between 730 and 720 per mile. So you might not be recovering enough from those mile repeats. Okay, and what are the paces you're running for your long runs? Okay, that's the other question. 8-minute per mile pace. So see, that's a marathon pace. That's one reason you're bonking. You're not giving yourself a chance to recover. Okay, so again, easy. If you're trying to break 330, easy pace, you're running anywhere between 9:45 and 9 minutes per mile. That's easy pace. Steady pace, it's 9 minutes to 8:15 per mile. Okay, progressing towards marathon pace. You don't need to do your long runs at marathon pace or goal marathon pace. So if you're looking to break 330, you got to slow the long runs down. That's one reason you're kind of crashing. So locking into those specific paces are very important. If that makes sense. Let your body adapt. You're not giving yourself enough time to recover from workouts. And again, if you're trying to break 330, you got to slow things down a little bit in your workouts, and slow things down a little bit in the long runs. You let your body adapt to it. That's one reason your body's not ready to recover and basically run the races that are commensurate with those times. So you gotta have to slow down a little bit. How long does it take usually to jump from 3? It really depends on the person and how you progress. No, it doesn't take 5 years. No, I mean, well, it's different for everybody, but if you set up your training appropriately, and what I'd recommend is, let's say you run 330, 329. The next cycle after that, I generally recommend folks train for 5K to 10K to 15K and half marathon and stuff like that. Use it as a speed development component, and then you move back up to the marathon. Then you do similar things. You have the long runs in there, semi-long runs, the progression runs and stuff like that, but the workout focuses are slightly different, and it acts as speed development component. That way when you go up, back up, you can work your way and see how well you progress. And this is why I generally do not recommend increasing paces of your training runs or workouts unless you have a time trial or a race that backs it up, because that tells you that you're ready to increase the training paces. And you don't want to increase volume and intensity at the same time, ever. Only one or the other, okay? Your body has to adapt. If you're able to break 330, what should be your next goal finish time? Well, I would move back down to 5K and 10K and even half marathon, start training for those. So, maybe your next goal, if you ran 21:50, your next goal is to break 21 minutes for the 5K. And that's the next progression point. So, and then what's equivalent to that, you work your way towards that, but that'll be the next goal. So, and you set up your training accordingly. Sub 3 hour pace feels that, at right now, it's because you're not ready for it. But that's why dropping down and focusing on some shorter stuff will really, really help you. You need to use that as a speed development component. And this is, a lot of folks don't do this. They just focus on the marathon and wonder why they're not getting much faster. This is why they're not giving themselves a chance to train for the shorter stuff and then move back up in the next cycle. And you'll see how much better you adapt into marathon training. Can't even run for, don't worry about that right now. That's the goal for the next. So, the next focus would be, we're going to try to run a 5K at 340 pace. It's at 640 pace. That's okay. Right now, it doesn't matter. What you run is what you run. Now you focus on training for the marathon, and after that, you recover, and then you focus on the next progression point. And again, this is why you have to let your body adapt. So if you just ran these times for the half marathon, now you translate. Now you do some of those workouts that we just talked about at half marathon pace and 10K pace and 5K pace and stuff like that. Okay, because that's where your current fitness is. You always want to train at current fitness, not at your fitness where you want to be a year from now. This is where people get ahead of themselves. They can get hurt. They can get sick, and that's the last thing you want to do. So you got to be careful with that. How to deal with 3:30 marathon after the 20 miles. Psychological. Break it into pieces. This is what I tell folks too. Break it into 5 pieces. Okay. Each piece, the first 4 pieces is 5 miles. Okay. Get that 5 mile, chalk it. 5 mile, chalk it. The last piece is 10K. So just mentally get yourself to the point where you're thinking, okay, I only have 5 pieces here. And then once you're at the 20 mile mark or approaching it, 20 mile mark, you only have 1 piece left. And it's 1 10K instead of, oh my God, I got 6 miles. Because mentally it can be a little bit of a psychological thing. So this is a way of breaking it down in a way that makes it easier for you. Or you can break it up in 3 pieces, 10 miles, 10 miles, 10K. So, and that's kind of the way I'd like to look at it and kind of recommend or encourage my athletes to do. Yeah, I mean, the wall will hit you if you're not ready for it. And that's where training at current paces is important and building out from that. Getting to a 20-mile long run, doing a simulation run, even going a little bit past 20 miles, okay, and get to the point where and not every long run needs to be a marathon pace. You can do 10 miles easy, then 10 miles a marathon pace, or progression run from easy to marathon pace. There's a lot of different ways you do your long runs, and so many folks try to do marathon pace, and they're not giving themselves enough time to recover. It's almost impossible to run a 20-mile long run at marathon pace. It's very hard, very, very hard. But I wouldn't be afraid of the wall. Yes, it's there, but it doesn't hit everybody. If you train the right way, it won't hit you the way you think it'll hit you. So that's why do more than if your body can handle 22, building towards it, yes, that's fine. But you have to build towards it gradually over time. And your longest long run should be no more than 4 to 5 weeks out from the marathon. After that, you start tapering a little bit back on the long runs. Diminishing return. When it happens, people decelerate. They start to slow down. Okay, that's why progression runs are important. Training your body to go from slower to faster is a good thing because your body gets used to it, and that's something you can do in a marathon itself, and it gets you in the habit of not starting too fast. Not in the same thing with runs. That's why I encourage progression runs all the time. So it's a way of training the body to go faster, slower to faster instead of faster to slower. So this has to be done in training. All right. Other athletes that run a marathon training, yeah, not everybody, but they don't run a marathon at goal marathon pace during training camp. That's not what they're doing. Like Eliud Kipchoge is not running 2-hour marathons in practice. Not happening ever. So these are things that you build towards. They're building blocks. That's why training has to be a little bit more precise for a marathon than a 5K, because you can't come back next week and do it again. So that's why doing the right things at the right time is so important. Well, you should be able to run a mile in about 6:25 to 6:20 to get under 3:30, and then you build out from there. Okay, mile equivalent for sub 3:30 is that. Should be able to run about 21:50 for a 5K. Should be able to run about 1 hour and 40 minutes and about 45 seconds for the half marathon. Those are your equivalents for a sub 3:30 marathon. And those are things that you build into along the way. That doesn't mean you have to be able to run all those right now. Doesn't matter. The goal is to get you ready to run sub 3:30. Then, not now. And you're building towards it over time, over 12 weeks, 16 weeks, and so on. So, mile equivalent for sub 3. That's a little bit faster. I mean, you're probably looking at closer to. I have to do the calculations, but you're looking closer to maybe about almost 6 minutes. Almost 6 minutes. So, but I wouldn't worry about that right now. I wouldn't worry about that. If you run a half marathon for 1:33, if you run a 1:33 for a half marathon, you should have no problem getting under 3:30 for the marathon if you're doing the right training. So absolutely, what you should, if you can break 140, that's a good sign for a sub 3:30, provided you're doing marathon training, marathon workouts, and long runs along the way. So, yeah, again, it's close to 6 minutes, Dimitri, for the half. I mean, for the mile, for the sub 3:30. Yeah, that's 190 and 133 half. That's a pretty fast half. So keep in mind that the sub 3:30 is 8 minutes. So you should be able to kind of build out. You should be able to do a 15-mile run at some point about 5 weeks out if you're not running a half marathon. But you should be able to do a 15-mile run at about 7:50 to 8 minutes per mile. Should be no problem if you run a 133 for the half. So that's good running. That's good running. Really good. Any other questions? Anybody? All right, well, I'm going to wrap it up, guys. I'm going to get moving. I'm moving into a new house today, so I'm going to do another one of these videos next weekend. If you want to continue sub 3:30, just leave me some comments in the comment section. It is a tough time. You have to build it in, Dimitri. That's why you do long runs. You do, your first 10, let's say you do a 20-mile long run. You do the first 10 miles easy, the second 10 miles at marathon pace. You need to know what it feels like to run marathon pace later on. Not for the whole entire 20 miles. So try that long run. Okay, 10 miles easy and then 10 miles at marathon pace. Try that one. All right? All right, guys. Good work, and I'll talk to you next time.